Ryan Gilyeat, welcome to Mold Week on Women's Wellness Radio.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. I know you're super busy fixing all the water damage that's going on in Portland, Oregon. So I really appreciate you taking the time to just educate on this wider level about how to remediate a home that's been water damaged. So, wonder if you can get us started just talking about how you got into this field, and you seem to be very passionate about this field. So, I just like to hear more about your story.
Cool. Um, well, it all started, I guess, back in high school. My friend's dad owns Chem Dry Carpet Cleaning, and I started cleaning carpets, just helping out. And I got really good at it because I am passionate about everything I do, and I love working hard and taking care of customers, and the instant gratification of doing something good and having people be excited about that. I graduated into other things, got into water damage restoration. During that time, I was going to school. I wanted to be a forest ranger. I wanted to be a real estate agent. I wanted to be a biologist. I wanted to do all these things, but I kept on ending up working harder and longer. And it's just an industry where I felt that there was a niche and somewhere where I could make a difference and make a good living doing it. And I decided to go for it.
Mm.
So I worked for a couple of franchise companies. I worked for Service Master, ServPro back in my early days and learning the water and mold world. And then on my 26th birthday, I broke my leg, and my boss told me I couldn't come back to work until I could carry a fan. And I was kind of insulted because I grew this company massively.
Mm.
But I decided to put all my eggs in one basket, and I bought a carpet cleaning van. And that was in October of '07. And by December of '07, I owned Oregon Restoration and started cleaning carpets. And let people know that I would do water and mold, which I wanted to eventually become a water and mold only company. But it takes time to build a reputation. And in this industry, most leads come spoon-fed from insurance companies. So your client is the insurance company. Reputation isn't the biggest important thing, because you're going to get the work no matter what. Online, there's review sites like Angie's List and Home Advisors, and now Yelp and Google, that start reviewing companies, and you can't hide from that. You are who you are. And so I wanted to be the best company in town. And I studied, I traveled the country and took every water damage and mold course I could take. And I became Portland's only certified master water damage restorer through the IICRC. And through the last 10 years, I've been building this company to be the baddest mamma jamma in the area. I take a lot of pride in my work. I'm very hands-on. I'm here every day. All my guys are trained. They're all keyed into being the best customer service quality guys on the block. And they are. I love my guys. And that's who I am. That's why I'm here. And this is what I do every day.
I love it. Well, you get to be a rock star this week in Mold Week because we are just celebrating people who are helping with this understood, how do you say, little understood issue of mold and water damage. So I think this is so important. As someone who's been affected by it, I know the damage it can do to your health, and an early step to take when you have water damage is to remediate your home. It's so important to do it properly, and I think it's important to know it's not just an aesthetic issue or like a just get her done issue. It can become a really big health issue if it's not done right. So, everyone values their health, or they do when it goes.
It's
So,
their health and their home, the two most important things to them most of the time.
that's really true. So we kind of got inspired to do this because of the hurricanes. You're in Portland, where I used to live, where my water damage happened. So not so much hurricanes there, but lots of water,
Lots of
certainly.
water and lots of mold because it's a wet, damp area.
Yeah. So I'm just kind of curious, like the types of cases you see. Like, are they heavy rains or burst pipes? Like, what's kind of the ratio of things you work with?
As far as variety, we do see it all. I mean, from frozen pipes to exploded appliances to CPVC was a really big building plumbing product. in the 90s and 2000s, and the elbows are going out. They're causing all sorts of water damages in people's homes, toilet overflows, fish tank leaks, rain flooding in people's driveways into their house, everything.
Okay. And my thing that I had in Portland was, well, two things I think it turned out to be. One was like gutters not aligned right and getting water leakage into the basement. And then our former owner installed windows incorrectly, so water was leaking in through the walls. Is that something that you see a lot too?
Leaky basements are probably one of the most predominant things I work on.
Okay.
And they're really kind of frustrating because people want more out of their basements than what they should be. And you're working with a house that's built in 1925 in a basically marshy area, and people in the boom start changing these unfinished spaces into finished spaces with drywall. And then, a couple years later, when the cracky old foundation leaks, as they're just bound to do it, they get water damage. And oftentimes in a basement, it's not found right away because it's inside the wall, it's behind the base trim, it might be behind a cabinet, and you don't notice it until it's a moldy mess. And, with foundation leaks and window leaks, things like that, those are considered slow leaks. And they do cause the more extensive damage like mold. And consequently, that insurance companies don't pay for slow leaks. So this is always an issue that comes out of the homeowner's pocket. And in which case you're out there trying to measure contractors to take care of you. And that's where you experience your issues.
Yeah, you're paying out of pocket. And the insurance adjuster we had on, he talks about it. Like, there's maybe cases where you could get a little money, it sounds like, for a slow leak. I mean, they certainly weren't offering us any money, but we didn't have an adjuster kind of fighting for our cause. And yeah, we had drywall, we had carpet, we had so much stuff in that basement too. We had to get it out to remediate. I think you're right. I think a basement, now my opinion of basements is like, do not enter. I was just at my aunt's in Canada, and she's like, oh, do you want to go to the basement? I had to make a phone call. They have a finished basement. I went down there and I went right back up because I'm very sensitive now to the musty, moldy smell, and they may not be, but yeah.
It seems like people who have had their health impacted from mold become more aware of it. And when you're in a new place that has it, your body will instantly tell you it's there. And you're like, nope, I'm out.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about the difference between slow leaks. You said they can do more damage than like a toilet overflowing or a fish tank exploding or whatever. Yeah, I do think that's a bit of the silver lining, so to speak, about having one of these incidents, is that you can address it quickly. So tell us more about that.
Well, in the water world, there's two types of leaks, the slow leak and the sudden loss. And the reason why those are separated partially is due to insurance coverage, but mostly due because of the damage they create. An instantaneous loss will spread across your entire room, entire house very quickly, and it will damage a lot of square footage. But if you can get a professional out there quickly, we can restore that home without doing a lot of demolition and damage, because the house hasn't been wet for so long that microbial growth develops. And we as trained professionals know how to dry it out, what moisture content each material needs to be to prevent microbial growth. That is our sole existence. That's what we do. But in a slow leak, because it's happening a little bit at a time, it comes in and it only affects a very small area. And then that stays wet for a certain amount of time, and then it gets reaffected with more moisture and it stays wet. And so the damaged area is very small in scope, but it's got lots of mold, there's rot, there's things that you would never have seen. And that is the health concern. That's when you need to plastic off the areas and build containments and use air scrubbers and remove all the affected material and use personal protective equipment. And, I could go on. That's the main differences. One, the slow leaks are typically a health and structural concern, where a sudden loss can be quickly cleaned up with minimal damage, unless it's a sewage instant loss, and then that's bad too.
Yeah, that happened to a friend of mine recently. I was feeling so bad for her. So you're saying in a sudden loss, you potentially don't have to take out floors and drywall and stuff if you can dry it fast enough?
Yes, there
Okay.
are certain things that have to be done no matter what. If vinyl gets wet, it has to come up because the water wicks around it absorbs into the particle board underlayment, and then the vinyl is now a vapor barrier and it won't evaporate. The water
Okay.
stays in that particle board and it gets nasty. The back of the vinyl is paper backing, it gets bad. On drywall, when you have an exterior wall affected and it's been a pretty significant amount of water, you should, according to code, take the drywall off at a 2-foot flood cut to make sure that the insulation inside the wall gets dried and the bottom plate gets dried. Interior walls, typically we remove the base trim at the least to make sure that we're drying the base of the drywall and getting air to the bottom plate that the drywall is adhered to. Because the base trim creates a sandwich, it doesn't allow that base of the drywall to dry. With carpeting, we usually extract it. We'll probably lift the carpet, replace the pad, or remove the pad at that time and dry everything out, because the pad is usually just a nasty sponge. It's easily replaced and it takes too long to dry out. So we just get rid of it. And then we dry everything out in place right there. And then you get new pad, the carpet gets reinstalled and cleaned. You get the base trim reapplied and painted, new vinyl in. Those are usually the average repairs done on most water damages. The only time you can dry things out in place is when those type of materials aren't necessarily affected, or you can get enough heat on it immediately to pull that moisture out.
Okay, and I think I've heard, is it like 24 or 4, how many hours can drywall be wet, so to speak, before it becomes microbial?
The old rule used to be 72 hours.
Okay.
Every 72 hours, 3 days, a water category turns from clean to gray to black because the microbial growth that develops along that time frame. But they have since changed the rules as far as the exact 72, because sometimes there's already microbial growth there and things germinate a lot faster. And in some substrates, it takes longer than that. So they've done away with 72 as a general rule, or a technical rule, but it is still a general rule and just kind of an industry standard to go by when classifying a water damage.
That's really interesting. So yeah, with some of these sudden losses, like a fish tank thing, I could see you could get in there quickly. But we've been talking to some people in these hurricane areas, and they can't get in there, or they're not getting contractors quickly enough. So I'd imagine in those cases, there's more loss of drywall and materials. Would you say?
Absolutely. In those particular situations, there is no choice but to do a flood cut. You get
Okay.
above the water line, you cut all the drywall off below that, you remove all the flooring material, and you get the house to raw framing below the affected material.
Okay.
And then you have to sanitize the framing because it's been sitting in flood water. I mean, there's all sorts of bacteria and contaminants in that water. And then you have to dry the moisture content of that framing to below 18%, because over 20% you can get structural rot or dry rot. So anyway, that's the point at which we would focus on as remediators to get it below 18%. At that point, it's dry. It's not going to grow any microbial growth. You can choose to sanitize it one more time. But then you can start the reconstruction process of putting new drywall, new flooring, building the house back together again. But you should never try and save anything that's been affected with flood water.
Okay. Okay. That's good advice. So, yeah, I think you've given us some good tips for people who've been in a flood area. Do you want to give us some other, like, say someone's just had a sudden loss? We'll start with that one. Someone who's just had a leak or what have you, what should they do? Where should they start?
It depends definitely on what's going on, but to minimize the amount of area that gets wet is in your best interest. So to throw a bunch of towels down, sheets, whatever you can do to contain the water to a smaller area, because then you have a smaller area to dry out later. If you can get a shop vac going and extract out the standing water, that's a good idea. Always move any valuables out of the affected area, artwork, electronics, music equipment, any furniture that has a wood leg or a metal leg. You want to make sure it's up on top of wax paper or tinfoil so it doesn't leave stains on the wet flooring.
Oh, okay.
And then depending on the time of year, if it's, warm outside, I would say open all the doors and windows, because that excess water in your house is going to elevate the humidity. And then that excess humidity is going to absorb in the other absorbent materials in your house, like the wall boards, other artwork, books, and start damaging them. If you actually have a flood scenario, sandbagging the doors will prevent a lot of water from coming in if it's just, a few inches to a foot or something. Other situations, to prevent an appliance failure when you're not around, or it's a vacation home, you can shut the water off at the main. You can also drain all the water in your lines by opening up like a water bib on the outside, a hose bib on the outside, and draining all the system. You can make sure to close up the footing vents in the winter time, because the cold air gets into your crawl space and can freeze and break your pipes. So you want to make sure and have the crawl space footing vents clogged up. And then just make sure the water lines that you have exposed are insulated, and that will save a lot of issues right there. There's also an alarm you can buy and install and have put behind your appliances or in water prone areas that will send you an alarm to your phone and tell you there's water damage happening. Or they can also have an automatic shutoff placed to your water main that the alarm will cause the shutoff to shut, and that'll prevent a lot of damage. And there's a lot of water meters online. If you were to Google it, there's all sorts of them. But those
Oh,
are
that's interesting. Yeah, we just got like a little one for under our sink that just makes a noise. And then I think same for, we got just our air conditioning installed, and they put one in the pan. So if the pan starts to fill, I think it just makes a noise, and then we're supposed to call someone. But that water one in our under our sink already went off. It turned out to be a small thing. I had like a bottle of vinegar or something that was knocked over, and so it was small, but it was pretty cool that it worked, because if that was the pipe leaking, yeah, we wouldn't have known, and it could have started to damage the floors and the drywall and all that. So
imagine if that was like a slow leak situation where it was like dripping, and it's not something that's a burst that you're going to see right away, but it affects that. And those slow losses are the things that cause the most damage. So if you had the sensor back there, and there was a slow leak, we would have prevented that.
And what do you think about, just little things, like people will say, well, what about if I have mold on my windowsill or mold in my bathroom, or like one person told me under her futon got moldy. Like, should people really be like looking out for moisture in those situations too?
Excess moisture in a home is a huge problem. So mold only grows on wet organic material. So if you've got mold building up in your windows, you can slow that down at the very least by continually cleaning your windows. There's a product that you can put in there called Concrobium Mold Control. And
What's
you
it
can
called?
get that at
Concrobium?
Concrobium Mold Control.
Okay.
And you get it at Home Depot, and it's a salt solution. It's super safe, and it kills mold by crushing and encapsulating the spores of the cells, and then leaves a salty residue that mold does not like and inhibits its ability to come back. You can also use that to clean your bathroom when you have situations come up, just on the surface of the paint from too much humidity. But one of the biggest reasons why you have all this excess humidity in the house is because people aren't using their bath fans enough, or it's not working at all. And then all that excess humidity from your shower builds up in your house and starts condensing on everything, becoming liquid moisture. It condenses in the old windows. In old houses in Portland, it happens on exterior walls because they're not insulated well enough. And people put their dressers or hang mirrors on exterior walls or put their headboard up against the exterior wall. And then you get stagnicity, a lack of airflow, and that condenses moisture quickly. So in older homes, I definitely recommend people not place things on any exterior walls. Make sure that they have them spaced at least, say 4 to 6 inches so that there's airflow. Make sure you're well ventilating all the rooms of your house, and that you're overusing your bath fans and that it's completely dry before it turns off. There's even humidity sensing fans that people can install that come on automatically and shut off automatically when they need to. So there's a lot of humidity prevention techniques out there.
Yeah, I think the bathroom fan is a neglected part of the home. Like they're old and I'm like super noise sensitive, so I hate running the fan. But now I get it. Like and it's usually like a half an hour you're supposed to run it. Also, I think closets, like people over shove things into closets, and yeah, you don't know if there's like changes of moisture levels, and you're developing mold on clothes or books or something. So there's another good reason to clean out your closet.
Yeah, and don't overstuff it, especially in old houses that have the closet on the exterior wall.
Those are great tips. Yeah.
Yes.
And then I
So,
think it's probably, I mean, I'm curious what you see, but I would imagine if I was in this situation, I might just like kind of freak out and like leave and start making phone calls, but not think to like actually deal with the water that's there. What do you find? Do you find that people do these things automatically, or is it a mixed bag?
it's totally a mixed bag.
Okay.
I see people, I walk in, I'm like, well, what do you need me for? You're doing everything right. You need any advice? Let me know. I'll help you finish it up. Or other people that are like, literally, Ryan, here's the keys. Don't call me till it's fixed. I don't want to
Okay.
look at it. I want to touch it, but if people are willing and able, you want to try and shut the water off. Yeah, and you want to try and protect your home as quickly as possible.
Yeah, shut the water off and turn off like electricity. Would you say turn off electricity? Because that cause problem?
Yeah, it depends. The
Maybe.
only time
Okay.
it's really ever I've seen it be an issue is when you have a flooded basement and you have like standing water in a basement. You don't want to go down there because you could have some sort of electrical device live in the water and it could electrocute you. Same with crawl spaces. Sometimes crawl spaces have water in them and people have to go in there to start installing sump pumps and whatnot. But it's important to extract that water out first before going into those areas.
Okay. So it sounds like if you're handy, some of these things you could do yourself quickly before the water. I would imagine don't still be in there when the water's getting older and nastier. But if you can quickly do some of these things you're describing in your hand, like I don't feel like I would be comfortable pulling out the trim and the carpet and all that. But some people have experience with that kind of a thing, I imagine.
Yeah, that's definitely something that can be left for the professionals and we can do that quickly and cleanly so it's easy to repair.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned earlier that not everyone is certified to do things properly and that insurance companies just kind of dole out the work. And I mentioned to you before we started recording, I was different. I was a slow leak case. But, we got a few quotes and people said, oh, we'll put up plastic, we'll run air scrubbers. But, we weren't experts in the details of these kind of jobs. And we didn't really know what to, who would be best, so to speak. We did sort of like just kind of hire someone who we had, was a nice guy, had a good feeling about, and had a good price and seemed fine. But it sounds like we should have been a more informed consumer. So tell us more on like how to find a good company, how they should be doing it.
Well, that's a lot of information you're asking. I don't even know where to start really. Um, so yes, the insurance companies do dole out work, but not in the direct, what we call the direct pay world, because these are slow leaks. These are something you as a homeowner have to figure out. And it's not like you're given a handbook on what to do in the event of a water loss when you buy your house, although we do hand those out now, right? But that's one of the reasons why we have really developed the customer service side of our business and became Portland's highest rated company, is because we're trying to educate people on what to do and what the differences are. Because you do not need to be certified to do this work. You only need to have insurance and have a state business license. And people, it's a copycat industry. A lot of people think they know what they're doing because they've heard or seen other people do it. They don't understand the biology of mold. They don't understand how small mold spores are and how pervasive they can be. They don't know how to set up an air scrubber so that it's running under negative pressure. They don't know how to use the proper personal protective equipment so that they're not doing all the work in a dirty environment and then bringing that dirtiness right through your house, contaminating that space. And how you figure out whether or not that contractor is able to do that, that's tough. That's really tough. I'm not sure that every person in every market is going to be able to really monitor their guys that well. But
Okay, so you're saying the workers, there's a weak link potentially with the worker actually following the protocol is one of the many places there could be.
They're not trained.
Okay.
They're not trained. You get an estimator who comes out who might be certified or not, might be trained, just has a couple years as a worker. Now he's estimating, and
True.
the stuff that he was told by, the uncle at the company telling him what to do as a worker is what he thinks the rules are. What the industry standard is. They don't necessarily leave other companies and find out all these other information from other companies they work for. That's the information they get. And then they go and duplicate that. So you do get a lot of water down between, owners and estimators to technicians right then and there. I wish it was required to be certified to do this work, like it would be lead or asbestos. This is people's health. So why not require people to be certified to do the work,
So this organization you mentioned, this IICRC, is that what it's called?
Mm-hmm.
Is that like a website people can go and see if there's someone certified in their area?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The easiest way is to go to thecleantrust.org. And the Clean Trust is the organization, and the IICRC is their school for teaching. The IICRC is the Institute of Inspectors, Cleaners, Restorers certifications.
Okay.
And I'm actually a certified master water damage restorer.
Okay, so we can go to so cleantrust.org will have a rundown, but I would imagine in some areas there is no one who's certified.
No, and I've known good contractors out of market that aren't certified, but they're the best in their industry and in their area, and they really are doing good work. They just haven't gotten certified for whatever reason. So there's two other ways that people can judge their workers and the contractors they'd like to hire. And one of those ways is by hiring a mold testing specialist or an indoor environmentalist or indoor environmental professional, and IEP, like Mold Testing Services of Oregon, the person you were talking about. And they come in and they can establish the scope of the job before a contractor gets out there. They can do air samples and surface samples and tell you where the mold is at and what protocols need to be followed in order to do it correctly. This is an extra expense for the homeowner, but it is highly valuable in sensitive situations. And then the worker comes out and does the work under this protocol, and then that indoor environmental professional can come out afterwards and look at the work, look at the containment, make sure it was up, then test the inside of the contained space, the outside of the contained space, and determine whether or not they have elevated mold spores, if there's been cross-contamination, and if additional work needs to be done.
Okay, yeah, that's a good tip. I would say in my case, we did have a mold inspector first, and I would imagine in some cases a slow leak, you do go to a mold inspector first, often before you remediate. You got to know what you're dealing with, and then our mold inspector recommended, gave us a few names, but I wouldn't say they supervise exactly how things would be done. I guess the names he gave us are people he thought would do a good
They're not
job.
supervisors, they're just inspectors. So
Okay.
they will establish the scope of work and then they will check the work at the end. So that's the best right now. That's the average. You could pay that mold inspector to monitor the mitigation contractor and do like daily checks on them, but nobody does that. I suppose you could, and in some
Hmm.
situations it'd be a really good idea, but mostly it's just hiring somebody you trust and making sure that they're following the basic safety protocols of making sure the containment is sealed with tape around all the edges. They're using suits inside the containment and they're taking them off before they come out of the containment. Um, and they're carrying their bags out. They're either taking them out a window or they're double bagging them at the containment entrance before they carry them out of the house. Or sometimes I build plastic containment tunnels that go to the front door so you can take it right out of the containment out the front door. Um, those are just little things that contractors need to do.
Mm.
Really not sure what to say. I wish there was a better way for you to be able to monitor people, but it's really hard. It is
Well,
really
you
hard.
gave us some good tips right then. It's just about the taping and the like. I'm trying to think back now. This was quite a while ago that ours remediation with them. I'm like, was there tape on every edge? I mean, I definitely remember him walking in and out in his suit, which means he wasn't taking the suit off. So that was happening. I distinctly remember when it was sort of all done, so to speak. I went down to the basement and he was giving me the tour, and I immediately had asthma, and I was like, no. And he's like, no, it's all clean. We've done it all right. And I was like, nah, I wouldn't feel like this. We're all done right. But I was just a ignorant consumer. We that's how it is when you know this business really well, and I didn't. But I knew from my body that something wasn't right.
Those are the
And
situations you absolutely want to hire a mold testing specialist. Um,
yeah, and we did actually. We didn't just do the remove. We did every. We ended up selling the house, so we new carpets. Da, da, da. So when the house was completely empty, like literally empty, we had the air tested again, and it passed. But the extent we went to, I think, to really make it clean enough for our health was, I believe, even maybe more extensive than you would say. Like an air test is just testing spores, right? It's not finding toxins. Is that correct?
it's just counting the spores, and that's airborne spores. It doesn't count the settled spores.
Exactly. So I think there's a weak link there as well. So like for us, first of all, we had lived in a house with mold for a long time. So who knows how much toxin had already spread. And then we stayed in the house while it was remediated, and all our stuff wasn't in the basement, but it was everywhere else. And the guy was coming up and down, and who knows. But I'm pretty darn sure that when we remediated, everything got worse for our health because the toxins were flying around. So that's one place where, yeah, with the contractor we had, and I think others that we talked to, they're like, no, you should do the air scrubber and then it's fine. I'm like, I don't think it quite
You know,
works
the
like that
truth
from a
is,
health perspective.
and the more I'm talking to you, the more I'm kind of just remembering it, and I guess making it public too. The quality, the average quality in the industry is very, very low. It
Okay.
wasn't hard for us to take the number one spot in town. There was nobody in number one. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
and I think you're right. People probably learn on the job, and like they're wearing they got the air scrubber, and then it seems like they're checking off the list. But it sounds like there's little details about, are you taking your suit off, da da da. That
It's a detail industry. You have to be
yeah,
very precise with what you're doing because you're dealing with a mold spore that is essentially a gas. It is so light, it stays airborne for hours to days, and any movement just walking through the space will bring those settled spores back into the air again. And if you allow those to be collected on your clothes or on the trash bags you're carrying, or you don't seal your containment properly, or you don't have it under negative pressure, that air is just dissipating and it's going throughout the rest of the house. It's going everywhere that air can go. And people just don't give it credit because they're not looking at it. They can't see it with their own eyes.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
And I'm remembering like the vacuum. I'm like, what vacuum did he? I hope he used his own vacuum because that's, you don't want to ever use that vacuum again if you've, vacuumed up
no,
after remediation.
yeah, use special commercial grade certified HEPA vacuums. And they have HEPA filtration and they also have ULPA filtration, which is just a little step of higher in efficiency than regular HEPA. And that's how you can vacuum and collect the mold spores and they stay in the vacuum. They don't go through the vacuum like other just regular house vacuums or shop vacs would.
Okay. So I want to back up because people might be freaking out a little bit at this point, like, oh my gosh, like, could this happen? And so there's these different types of leaks. There's the traumatic, like hurricane, what do you call that? Flood water. Okay. And then there's what did you call it? The incident, I forget what you call it. Oh, sudden loss.
Yeah.
I'm going to learn my terms. So if those are remediated correctly from the outset, there could be very little damage to your property and potentially no mold left behind if it's done correctly.
Yeah.
But
the problem is you've got contractors that are doing things like cleaning the surface of drywall, like saying, look, the mold's gone. I was just looking at so we have this magazine, it's Restorers and Remediation, and in there they're promoting this chemical supplier and this process developer for mold remediation. I won't say their name, but I went and looked at them, and they are on their own website with video cleaning mold on contents by just wiping it off. When you can't do that, it's a fabric. You need to rinse the fabric if you even can touch a fabric like that, without any personal protective equipment, respirators, suits, anything, just open air in the person's house without even so much as an air scrubber. And they're selling that online publicly today. So it's not only that there's not enough education out there, there's misinformation out there. So like in that floodwater situation, what I was getting at is like, even though the surface of the drywall may look clean because you cleaned it off, the backside could be horrible.
exactly.
And that will, severely contaminate your air. So you have to do certain minimums, like remove the drywall. And when you have situations like a flood, you get these contractors that are either money hungry or they just have a desire to help as many people as possible, and they end up cutting corners, going too fast. They're not doing everything they need to do. Or they're getting outside pressure from the homeowner saying, no, don't do any demolition, please just dry it out in place. And some contractors are weak and they do what the homeowner wants them to do instead of what they know is right. And that ends up leaving damaged material behind when it should have been torn out.
I think, and there's do-it-yourself too. When I got off the phone with the claims adjuster, he was saying a buddy of his had taken the claim check and was like, sweet, I got this money. Then did it himself, the work, but inadequately, and ended up living in the same home. Anyway, the carpet pad was full of mold. And he was there living in the home, sick. And only later, like 6 years later, he went to sell the home and change the carpet and found all that mold. So you gotta do it right, even if it's more expensive.
I try not to be like a fear monger or use scare tactics. I like to say your fear about the mold should be relative to the area of affected space. So if you have a small spot on the wall, you don't have to run for your life. It's not that scary and it can easily be cleaned up. But if your entire room's affected and you're sleeping with a bunch of mold behind your headboard, you should be concerned about that. You should consider what that's doing to your health, and you need to clean that correctly.
Yeah, yeah, and not everybody, has the same genetics and the same, triggers. So, for instance, our contractor, I'm like, I can't imagine he's in his moldy places all the time. I mean, you too. I'm like, I can't imagine doing that. But, genetically, you might be better suited to do it, or you've had other, like, less health stressors. So, we can't say every case you see mold, you're going to get deathly sick. It just depends on the case. And I just want people to just be aware that it can be a serious health hazard. So, best to catch it early. And I want to circle back to my case with the slow leak and the remediation, because I think I'm just starting to put things together. I mean, we were in that house a long time. There were probably already mold toxins on our things, and there had been a new small like leak in our basement, so I think we had a fresh dose, and then we had the remediation, which based on this conversation maybe wasn't done correctly, and we definitely got worse. So I don't know if we could have saved our belongings if we had taken them out before the remediation. I'm not sure, but yeah, all the porous things, and you'll hear this a few times during mold week, the porous things will absorb those gases that you talked about, and you can't really get them out. So in our case, I guess I'm just wondering, could we have saved more if we had taken everything out of the house before remediation, or if the remediation was done correctly? I'm not sure, because all that stuff was in the house for so long.
There's so many variables,
There
and
are.
I don't want to confuse clean water damage jobs and the processes and techniques you use to take care of those with a mold job. With a mold
Yeah.
job, you don't want to take anything out of the area because it's probably already contaminated and it needs to be cleaned before it's moved to another area. It depends on the type of job that you're working on to know what protocols to follow for safety.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, we were not advised to dispose of the things in the basement. We were advised to just get them out of the way so they could do the work, which means we brought them all upstairs, which probably was also a really bad idea. It's just, again, like lack of information, and I don't want to blame the contract. He knew he was doing his best, but this is why we're doing this event. Like, I'm a healthcare provider, and I did not understand any of this. And I got myself a lot sicker, which means a lot more expense and a lot more like lost time for myself. So yeah, it's so complicated, and it's so invisible. It's so hard to, how can you understand that a gas is like all over your things? Like, it's just a hard concept to even gather, especially like you said, your home, like it's your stuff you paid for, and you don't want to get rid of it. But yeah, I'm glad we're talking about this and comparing the different scenarios, because they all are different. We covered a lot of things. Anything you feel like we've missed, or that you want to summarize a little better?
It all depends on the topic. I talk about this every day, all day, so I could probably, take it till the evening. There are thousands of scenarios with thousands of species of mold, with hundreds of body types, if not more, in sensitivity levels. So not every job in every scenario, you're going to have the same outcomes. Not everybody's going to get sick. Not every house needs to be demoed. Not every mold is bad, but the general safety precautions of, if you know you have mold in a room, seal off that room, seal off the forced air vent into that room, like the heater, and maybe place a dehumidifier in there if you can, and then tape off the door to that room. And the reason is you want to control the airspace. You don't want the air being pushed out of that room by the furnace and blowing that down the hallway into other rooms. You want to control that airspace. And then by putting up that environmental control, so many times I've said that, then the remediator has something easier to work off of. Then he can make a quick decision on what items in that room need to be cleaned, what in the process. If you start moving stuff out of the room, if you start tearing into the wall yourself, you're going to make a humongous mess, in which it's going to take a lot harder to get that back under control.
Yeah. I remember at one point, we'd already spent so much money, and so my husband was like, "I'm going to demo this little area myself." Yeah. I mean, he did do some things right. He had the suit. He was actually putting the bags out the window. But we found like a mother load of mold colony in this area that were we containing it properly? I'm sure we were not. We
Yeah,
don't
the
have your
plastic unit
training.
barriers sealed off, and then an air scrubber next to the work being ducted out a window, so it's all negatively pressurized. Only clean air can flow in, no dirty air burps back out. That's the biggest problem. Even though his clothes and he had a respirator on, he's still wearing all of those mold spores, what's that guy, Pigpen from Peanuts, you know?
That's so funny you said that. That's the exact analogy I made in my talk. Yeah, the
No, and
mold
then
is
you're
just
walking
hanging
around with
around.
that, and you can't see
Yeah.
it, you don't realize it, but like these workers that don't wear the suits when they're doing the demolition professionally, they just get right into their car. Now the car is
Yep.
contaminated over and over and over again. It's just multiplying. And then they go home and they're starting to bring these spores to their own home. And then anytime there's just a little bit of water, mold sprouts up that much faster and easier because you already have all these seeds and spores ready to germinate it. Not to mention, you're constantly breathing a higher average of mold spores than you would in your everyday environment, which eventually starts to wear your immune system down, or affect
Yeah.
your family members differently than they affect you.
Yeah, yeah. I remember that, some, like my son was unaffected and my husband and I were. I'm glad you mentioned the ducts because I think that's important. If you get work done, you have to clean out, some professionally, have the ducts cleaned, changing your air filters often. The clothes is true. I mean, eventually we became more aware. Stayed in another house and we'd take our clothes off and we'd take showers, but it took a while for us to learn and understand, and some damage had already been done by transporting ourselves. I mean, we sold both of our cars. Like, we ruined our cars. So, yeah, it's, if you can know first, it's obviously more ideal, because when you don't know, you just end up, like you said, spreading it all over the place. And the amount of money it takes to clean it up when you've spread it everywhere is, it was like my salary for 2 years got put into, into all the mold related stuff. Yeah. So, I mean, we're lucky that some things worked out for us financially. We sold the home at a profit and that kind of, but, if otherwise, if this had happened when the market was collapsed, we'd just be in deep, deep debt right now. And
I feel so bad for people like that and people in your situation. And that's why I really love what I do, because this market especially needs a good remediator here, and it's a lot of gratification doing a good job and charging a fair price too. We're not the most expensive guys in town, even though I consider us the best guys in town.
yeah.
It feels good to help people like that.
Yeah,
My
maybe
heart goes out.
yeah, thank you. Maybe we'll inspire some people to go into this line of work, because I'm really glad that we are connecting, because it's like there's this health side and then there's this, physical building side, and we need to be talking and understanding each other, so that this is more coordinated
Health industry and the food industry.
yeah, exactly. So that, yeah, it's like it is a health issue that involves our environment. So we need to have people like you who really understand the environmental side of it and the physical side of doing it. So yeah, maybe we'll inspire some people to get into this field, because frankly I think it's growing. I think the mold problem is, we're going to just see more and more of it. Climate change is happening, and more homes. I mean, how many homes just got damaged with these hurricanes? In the millions, probably. So it's
Yeah, there's definitely not enough remediation contractors in the country to deal with an issue like that.
Oh, wow. Good to know.
People, big restoration companies from all over the United States are going and helping, but it's just no way. There's no way to take care of everybody. So people do need to learn about these things and what to do. There needs to be some sort of public awareness, some sort of, I don't know. There's so much information out there these days. It's hard for people to get one positive direction.
Yeah. Well, yeah, if you're watching this, you need a new career. Go into water damage restoration, because we need you. So, Ryan, your website is what?
It's OregonRestoration.com.
Okay. And we will link to that, and tell us some of the resources and things people can find there.
Wow. I don't know about resources per se. The website's pretty new, but my partner Aaron and I, that he's built the website. The resources page is something that I'm very passionate about and I'd like to make a bigger part of. Um, but there
Well,
are,
you can get this video up on there
yeah,
once we're
it
done
is up
with
there.
it.
But the IIC, the cleantrust.org is a
Okay.
very good place to go for information. Um,
And if you're in the Portland area and watching this, or how far away from Portland do you go to do work?
we're just southwest of Portland. We're just outside the city.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So if you're in the area and you're needing work done, you can contact Ryan or contact Garrett at our, we'll link to his mold testing company too. You know, we don't have resources. I don't personally know resources all over the country, but this Clean Trust site may have some, and we'll try to just gather as many resources as we can and links in that for people attending. Or if you're attending and you want to share, just these will all be posted on our blog. So if you're like, hey, I know a great remediator in so and so town, we'd love to hear it. You know, this is a lot of this is just the nuts and bolts of finding the resources
There's
to
definitely
get
good
help.
resources out there. They're just not on the tip of my tongue. So let me compile those for you, and then you can add them so people have a direct way to get to them.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you again, Ryan. We really appreciate that you have put in the passion and you're helping a lot of people. So thanks again for your time.
Thanks for having me on.